Good morning. Great to have you with us this morning for PMA-CIBC Summit Series number 2 of the year, the Builder Voice. We are thrilled to bring back a star-studded panel of absolutely marvelous participants in this industry, and you're going to get an earful over this next hour of what's going on and how we're addressing this housing market at the moment. We're bringing you Brad Carr, CEO of Mattamy Homes, Peter Politis, CEO of Greybrook Realty Partners, Julie Dilorenzo, President of Diamante Urban Corp, Mike Petrovsky, President of Profile Developments, Dina Pantalone, Managing Partner of National Homes, Miriam Mansouri Hurst, Vice President of Mansouri Living. So you've got a broad, diverse, really interesting group of people who are the movers and shakers in our industry today. We're thrilled to have them, and thank you for joining us today, speakers. I'm just thrilled you're part of it. Let me begin by thanking our sponsors, particularly CIBC. Without them, this would not be possible. The incredible Sherry Speakman and her team have been remarkably supportive. So if you need a mortgage, go to CIBC. Call Sherry today. SR Law, George and his team at SR are absolutely outstanding. Balcony Bliss, My Design Studio, Sagan, Smart Touch, Next Home, Buzz Home, Build, Aurea, Reliance, and Westmount Project. If you'd like to be a sponsor of our PMA CIBC series, please connect with Chris Markovic at the end of this program. All sponsors are really an outreach to broaden our base and broaden our data outreach to the community. So that's what that's about. And thank you, Leanne McEwitt and Melissa of McEwitt Partnership, for being the event producer and making this run smoothly and trying to keep me under control. My moderator, Chris Markovic, who will come on later during Q&A, and you'll meet that time CEO of PMA. And don't forget, if you stay right through to the end, there's a draw for a lunch from CIBC. Thank you, CIBC, and Chris will look after that. Coming up are 3 spectacular programs. We do these now on the last Thursday of each month. The lineup is really stunning. Inclusionary and diversity in the industry. What a subject, what a time, what a challenge to get at that. The Metrolink Summit in May with the senior representatives from Metrolinx. There it is on the screen. Thank you, Leanne. And city expansion and growth in our transit city application. And then booked in June, the return of Benjamin Tall, and really a State of the Union and where are we going and where we go from here as we exit the COVID calamity by that time. Let's hope fingers and toes crossed. So here we are. It's March the 25th, 2021. And 1 year ago, almost to the day, was our first lockdown. It actually occurred, I think it was March the 19th. And here we are 1 year later. A year ago at this time, we were fighting for toilet paper and hand sanitizer at Walmart. I remember even going there myself and being mobbed by 37 women for a one Lysol spray container. Oh my God, it was quite an amazing experience. We were debating about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. How incredible does that seem right at this moment? We were trying to understand social distancing. I was very familiar with the term social distancing. Most girls practiced that with me back in high school quite frequently, unfortunately. We had a chairman of CMHC predicting doom and gloom and 20% price corrections in this market. And 1 year later, we're looking for a new chairman of CMHC. I vote for Julie Dilorenzo. Julie, that should be your job. We coined the phrase elevator virus. In fact, directly from one of our first summits, that phrase became common use in the language a year ago. And we wondered where we'd be 1 year later. So here we are. Remarkable. Well, the housing industry survived. In fact, having been declared an essential service, it actually fared extremely well. But our management of the most vulnerable in our long-term care homes did not. We produced a vaccine at warp speed in 9 months, never been done before. But in Canada, our acquisition and distribution of that vaccine's been a disaster. It appears a year later that lockdowns have worked and controlled the spread of this COVID calamity. But at what cost to our economy, to our small businesses, and to our mental health? I don't think that story has yet been told. So here we are 1 year later in a housing boom. And it's not just here in Toronto, it's across Canada. It's in most markets in the United States. This sense of the individual consumer who locked down for many weeks and several different time frames, look around the space that they were in and said, I hate this space, I'm moving, I am out of here. And so whether it was bigger or smaller or a different location, the world during this COVID pandemic changed dramatically, and housing demand surged, probably unexpectedly for most of us, to the degree that it happened. The governor of the Bank of Canada has called it extrapolative expectation. I love that phrase, extrapolative expectation. By that, he meant the consumer extrapolates that there is limited supply, knows that there's limited supply, expects prices to continue to rise, and reacts by jumping into the market. Of course, a bubble may create or get created. An asset bubble, as irrational exuberance was coined by Alan Greenspan in the 90s, by actually the speculative, or it starts with perhaps some degree of investment, but the speculative influence takes control and starts to distort markets. And the extrapolative expectation is that rising prices, and some signal occurs that bursts that bubble and a correction occurs. We're probably in the signals of that kind of environment at the moment. Certainly we're feeling it at point of sale. And we're trying to do things, and I'm sure we'll talk about it this morning, that are trying to control the speculative influence within our market as best that we can. There's a limited supply like we've never seen before, both in new housing and in resale product, both 416, 905, 705, 519. And as the market expands into those area codes, as this COVID calamity pushed the consumer out to a long distance travel and work from home environment, caused tremendous pressure on the supply. And this is continuing to occur. Will it subside as we move into a more balanced market, as COVID dissipates somewhat? Will that demand push to the outer reaches subside? Whatever we bring to the market is selling out. We have lotteries, we have auctions, and we've done it all in a new format online. Quite remarkable change in technology through this period of the last year. I don't think I've ever gone through it quite so much in my career, of the intense learning curve, the amount and difference in change, and the speed of change in actual transaction is mind-boggling today. Absolutely phenomenal. It has put the builder-developer back in control, actually, and that's been a very important evolution. So let's hear from the players. After perhaps I've been able to set that stage for you, let's hear from the players who are actually active out there in the market, the ones who are making this happen, the ones who you watch and listen to and respect. Let me begin by introducing Brad Carr and Peter Politis. Brad's CEO of Mattamy for Canada, with specific operations in Toronto, Ottawa, and Calgary, Kitchener-Waterloo, among others. He's been there since 2013, after 12 years with Monarch Corporation and the purchase by Mattamy of Monarch Corporation. Brad will deliver. I forgot to ask him how much exactly, but well in excess of 3,000 units across the country this year. And as I read in the paper the other day, Mattamy US targeting 9,000 units. Quite an amazing, incredible operation, and what a credit to Canada to have such leadership in the marketplaces brought by Brad Carr and Mattamy Homes. Welcome, Brad. Peter Politis is CEO of Greybook Realty Partners. Now, Greybook is I'm not going to say relatively new. The Graybrook investment portfolio has been around for about 25 years, but the Realty Partners direct investment equity and financial has been relatively recent, probably since the early 2000s, and now managing and directly involved in over 85 projects across North America. Absolutely stunning billions of dollars in residential, commercial, and healthcare facilities right across North America. So what a company, what an organization. Congratulations, Peter, on your growth and tremendous innovation on the finance side. So, Brad, our policymakers generally attack the demand side curve of the marketplace. You know, from foreign buyers tax to stress tests to changes coming to first-time buyers mortgage program that's going to happen next month from CMHC. It always seems to be typically the demand side is push, push, push. Maybe that's the easier side to address, and maybe where a politician garners a first and early response. But the elephant in the room is supply. Greater supply will lead to a greater balance in this market and probably a greater affordability for most people. How do we address this supply issue? And how do we do it fast? Brad, over to you.
Good morning, Andy, and good morning to everybody out there. Thanks for having me, Andy. It's always a pleasure to engage in the conversation. These are always good conversations. I think that, you know, you're absolutely right when you say this is a supply problem, not a demand problem. And the irony is the lack of supply and the constant conversation around the lack of supply is, you know, ratcheting up this sense that I need to get in now. I need to get in now, because if I don't, there will be no more product. I think what's really important is that we continue to get all stakeholders onto that side of the conversation. And when I talk about all stakeholders, I obviously mean government and industry. One of the biggest challenges that I think we face going forward is that the federal government has stated that a big part of their recovery strategy from the COVID pandemic will be to increase levels of immigration. And while I think we can all agree that that's important for Canada's economic recovery, that just means more people chasing the same amount of housing supply and housing stock. I think we need to recognize that regional and municipal policies that look to either slow growth, contain growth, or stop growth altogether are colliding with that very federal policy that says we want to bring more people to our country. So how do we have those conversations? How do we have them quickly? And I think your point around speed, Andy, is so important, because we can't make more land. But what we can do is we can bring the land that we have through the system quicker. And how do we encourage policy changes at the regional and municipal level that would allow for approvals to take place quicker, that would allow for less, I'll call it intervention of the existing residents through NIMBYism or ratepayers groups. We have to have a general understanding that a certain level of housing and growth is important for everyone. And the notion that if you're already in a house, one of your jobs, or people see it this way, is to prevent others from getting in a house beside you. I think that that's one of the biggest challenges we face. So I think our industry is capable of this. I think our industry is doing a good job of increasing the conversation around this. And certainly, and hopefully, COVID will make it such that more and more municipalities will see the housing industry as a part of their economic recovery and will participate with us in moving faster.
Thanks, Brad. And Peter, you're active both in 416, in high-rise investment, in 905, in low-rise investment with multiple major builder developers. Are the two markets different on this supply issue? Is the urban 416 core deal with you differently than the 905, or is there commonality here? Is it the same rate of change that is just being stagnated? Is it the same approval process that's taking so long? I mean, I recently read that, I think it was a build study, that from purchase, acquisition to actual production and delivery of a piece of land now takes 10 years on average, 10 years. Peter, can you respond to this supply dilemma we seem to be in?
Sure. Andy, thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for being here. I think that we need to be realistic with moving the needle in terms of supply issues. We all want to fix, it's just like human nature to want to fix a problem fast. I have bad and good news. We can't fix this problem quickly because it's a complicated problem involving many stakeholders. The issues that exist in 416 are different than 905. You know, we're looking at a low-rise development right now in an area of the 905 in Toronto, and there's $300 million of front-ending costs that involves bringing these 6,000 lots. Many people, many stakeholders have to come together to figure all this stuff out. The challenges of getting things to market are not just approvals. In the 416, we have less infrastructure issues, notwithstanding we can argue there are infrastructure issues for density, but the approval process and the city process and the ratepayer process, which need to exist and have to exist, are slowing down things. I remember we bought a piece of land in 2011, end of 2011, at college in Spadina, and from application to SPA, we were like 9 months. That was in 2012. That process today is 3 years if you do it diligently. There hasn't been that level of red tape additions that we should be seeing in the 416. In the 905, there's studies from secondary plans to land uses to schoolings. Like there's many more things that have to go into an application process and an approval process. So every one of these areas are different challenges, but you need to get all the stakeholders together and understand I can't fix this overnight. And it's not simply in all cases just about processing an application earlier, getting to these lands, the infrastructure required, the cost, how these are financed. These are all things that exist. And everyone's kind of pushing and pulling in different directions. Every subsection of downtown has a different drive and a different thing that they want to focus on. That creates complexities in the approval process. We don't have broad-based policies that apply to cities or municipalities in all cases that will help focus the conversation. So if you're asking me, are they different challenges? For sure, they're different challenges. Are they all challenges? For sure. Can we fix the problem easily? I don't think so. And that's why it's going to become very important to more centrally look at how we take land through an approval process and understand what the factors are that are driving the time to this stuff, because they're different in all these cases.
What about the provincial lead here? Is there not is it the provincial responsibility, or is it regional, to bring these disparate groups and intentions from the 37 municipalities we have around the GTA together? Is that where the responsibility lies, or is there I mean, Metrolinx in itself as a transit center has been seems to have been working. I mean, lots of criticisms there, but it's been working. And do we need a greater provincial or regional position on housing supply?
Yeah, I
Peter?
mean, I'm going to use a funny analogy. It's like a parent telling an adult child what to do. Everyone has the best intentions and lots of experience in what works for them in their lives. And at the end of the day, the municipalities are working at a different level with their community, have different things and see differently. And notwithstanding the adult parent wants to tell their adult child how to live their life, it doesn't work that way. They don't always listen. So unless you're really creating policies that, like, I think the province has good intentions. I think most municipalities, not all, but most have good intentions. The functional workflow between the two are not working. So you need to get a very wide group of stakeholders to understand creating a more centralized process for everyone and a rules of engagement for everyone. And that is complicated because it involves many intricacies. There's not one bullet to change somewhere to say, fix it, right? Like it takes a lot of things in consideration. And the challenge, like anything in politics, is in 2, 4, 6 years, these people can all change, right? And that's the problem with it. In development, we as developers, we live our lives in 5 and 10-year increments. Like there is no 6-month increments in our lives.
Brad, any response to that before we move on?
No, I think Peter made some good points, and I love the analogy. I think that it's not an easy problem to fix, but like with any problem, you have to start, and you have to start somewhere. And I do think the province is having some good conversations around that. We could all probably spend this whole hour debating MZOs, but I do think they are taking a more proactive approach to see how they can participate in the conversation to bring supply at least back somewhat into balance.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Peter. Let's move on to Mike Petrovsky and Miriam Mansouri-Hurst. Mike is oversees real estate development at Profile. recently working on Canadian projects focusing on gentle density. I want to ask him about that, to provide more missing middle housing options within the greater Golden Horseshoe. He's innovative and he's very daring. I'm very impressed with his enthusiasm. Miriam Mansouri-Hurst is Vice President of Mansouri Living, leads the condo development division of Mansouri, with primary focus on development stages, including land acquisition, land use, and processing municipal approval, some of the things we've just talked about. She's very imaginative, very creative, and always looking for key points of differentiation. Mike, let me start with you. And we've been talking about drive till you qualify a lot during the whole COVID calamity. What happens to those who maybe drove too far? Do they come back to work in the GTA? Does work from home diminish? Is there an opportunity for a new commuter market? Mike, what's your thoughts on that? And what's gentle density? Tell me what that is.
Okay, I'll get to the gentle density first. It's kind of a consumer-friendly way to explain kind of the missing middle. Missing the middle sounded a little aggressively mediocre in a pedestrian sense of just like another term, where gentle density kind of explains it in a more nuanced fashion. In terms of the drive till you qualify, kind of what we've been looking at in terms of going into certain markets is, I think a lot of these people realistically that have moved far away are going to get back to the office sooner than later. But I don't think a lot of them is going to necessarily move back. What I think is going to happen is you can get a lot of these people that are going to get settled into the community. They'll have a critical mass of all these people moving into these new suburban areas, and there will be new employment opportunities to come in from that. And whether it's a mix of work at home, whether they get another job, whether, they figure something in the community, or, big change like moving from, say, the 416 to a farther away suburban area might change their whole, career in general. So it'd be interesting to see over the next 12 months what happens.
Any thought on what happens to this office commercial space that we're leaving empty? Those that are now working from home and not returning, let's assume it's half. My friends at Eric Burles have 4 floors of the TD Center that they are now reviewing as to where they go and what they do with all that space, where many of their lawyer associates are working from home. What happens with that commercial space? Mike, any thought on that?
We're not really too much on the commercial side, but our general thinking of it is the AAA office space. I think that's going to get hit probably a little more harder at first than the rest of everybody else. Even on some of the submarkets on the commercial side, people that still want to have their office space, they might not want to be downtown. They might not want to spend, $40, $60 a square foot on rent. If they can save half of that, or sometimes even a third, just going perhaps even closer where they live. So we'll see what happens in the next 12 months in terms of that.
Interesting, in New York, the office commercial space in New York is being converted in some areas to like a private club facility and amenity, try to attract the office user back to the space. Kind of really interesting, but including both full daycare facilities, gyms and restaurants and other private club kind of amenity. Very interesting, I thought. There may be a residential play there too, who knows? Miriam, I guess from the other perspective, you hope that not everybody left town, that they didn't all just pack up and elevator virus head out. Has the cost of distance disappeared? Are you positioning your high-rise product differently post-COVID? Is this market set to come back?
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody, for having all of us here. This is a great summit. So while I appreciate what Mike is saying in terms of a movement towards creating new communities with the office format growing out of this extension, I also believe that the biggest question we have to ask is, can companies force a return to in-person workforce? So people have proved that they can work from home, but must they come back if they've created this really positive, flexible output during COVID? I think it's easy to say that presently their jobs are secure if they've been doing well, but what happens in the next phase of their careers when it's time to manage a team or step into the next stage of their their professional life, and it's a requirement for them to come into the city. So again, for the same reasons that the pattern originally moved people from the suburbs into the city, I think we're going to see that cycle come up again. So we're looking at this more as a trend. People have looked at, because of the limitations with mobility and lack of travel, home has temporarily become a destination vacation. People want to be in proximity to certain amenities, being able to jump in a lake, go for a walk in the forest as quickly as possible. And that has happened in parallel with changes to the fabric of the city as well. The streets are different right now. There's a lot of for lease signs, but that's temporary. There's a rhythm and a beat to the city that's going to come back with a kind of a layering of culture that is not the same outside of the city. So I think that we're going to see a hybrid in the future. For now, if somebody needs to come back, the occasional 40-minute drive into the city, it's not a deal breaker. But going forward, I think we're going to see a shift. It actually reminds me of a folklore story that I read to my kids, which is the city mouse and country mouse. And they're cousins, and they go and each visit where the other person lives. And they're curious, their senses are awoken, but at the end of the story, they return to where they are. So in terms of what we're focusing on as well, and tying into what Brad and Peter were saying earlier, there is a very obvious supply issue. And I think that once land and the detached and townhouse product is more difficult to access, I think buyers are going to be looking for the right space for their families. So that will lead to a return to the vertical product type, which in our opinion includes the larger 3-bedroom models that cater to families.
I thought that was a very prescient remark you made the other day when we were chatting, and you said as the prices of townhouses have soared in both suburban and urban markets, that the 3-bedroom condo high-rise now resurfaces as an affordable alternative. Is that something you've been focusing on?
Yeah, so I absolutely, Andy, we did have that conversation. And, right now, if you want to get a townhouse in the 905, you're looking at least 1.1, 1.2. That's now. I think that's going to keep rising as supply diminishes. So absolutely, if you offset that to a 900 square foot 3-bedroom unit that still caters to the space requirements of a family, which is a sense of privacy in their togetherness, having the home office, having rooms for the kids, I think that's going to be a hot product going forward.
The other thing I thought was so interestingly forward thinking that you were presenting to me was playgrounds. You want to comment on that for a minute? I thought that was really special.
Sure. I think that, well, what we're looking at in terms of innovations in product type and just in general supporting amenities for buyers going forward is creating vertical communities for families and specifically targeting children. So I think that there's other places in the world where that's done exceptionally well. We see it's done great in New York, in Europe. The fabric there is different. The physiology there is different. They have less space, but I think that in a way, also tying into what you said about clubs, I think people are going to be looking for home as a club and the extension of their families through multi-generations, not just the adults, not just the grandparents, but the kids also. It becomes a huge asset and a value to have that within steps of your home. So we are really pushing towards creating spaces such as 4-season play areas for kids. So running tracks turn into skating rinks. How do you create flexible spaces, amenity spaces where you can host a cooking class for kids? This is going to become increasingly important for families.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Miriam. That's really, really interesting. Now, let me introduce to you Julie Dilorenzo, president of Diamante Urban Core. For those of you who do not know Julie, she's a driving force in the industry. She was the first woman chair of Build. There's no glass ceiling that she hasn't broken. Let me put it that way. What a model, what someone to revere as a woman in business she is at, and you know it in the product that she's developed. When I think of you think of the Phoebe, Domus, more recently Mirabella, the Florian at Bay and Davenport. Each of her projects takes on such a strong demand, strong design element like no other, and she's constantly looking for her point of differentiation. Julie, you're all about innovation, urban design, amenities, suite layout. What are the things you're doing differently in this supply constricted marketplace? How have you dealt with this market and its challenges?
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, the amazing Breather team. I think what's important is that the combination of the answer will be about affordable housing and how we're going to deliver affordable housing in the future. We can only innovate so much with built form because built form is pretty much shrink wrapped by municipalities. What we've tried to do is work very, very hard on our layouts like everyone else on this committee. I think by now we've got the most sophisticated purchaser group that we've seen in history. They come with analysis, overlaps of layouts, et cetera. So the industry has become much, much better for it. If we're looking for efficiencies to create affordability, I think we are one of the most efficient industries out there. We've got manufacturing that's based locally and close by to the product delivery. And so I don't think we're going to see much more than 5% come out in terms of affordability out of efficiencies of the system itself. What will we do in order to meet the demand of affordable housing? Why is affordable housing important? It should be integrated and dovetailed with free market housing. That way we share the infrastructure. Every great city needs affordable housing. How do we innovate to bring that to pass? Inclusionary zoning is coming. I think everyone should be ready for it. But in the sense of inclusionary housing, it's really just another tax on new home buyers because that housing needs to be subsidized by the balance of the inventory. So it's really not that innovative. It's simply telling the industry to take more of the burden, again, in terms of providing the community responsibilities. You know, in times past, corporations actually provided housing for their employees. There was a reason for that because we need a place affordably for people to live and close by to their work. So I think that we have to get the perspective that almost 20% or more of the average price of the home in the GTA is taxes. Should we be innovative and say to government that 20% should be subsidizing the infrastructure for the affordable housing? Our industry is burdened already as an industry, probably disproportionately to others. So instead of it becoming an indirect tax on homebuyers, which is not at all innovative, it should be earmarked for affordable housing. Another silent tax that's intended to be an innovation, but really isn't, is the family design guidelines. We're being asked to build units that are larger than what the market is demanding. Those units will either become luxury product or they will become subsidized by the balance of the building. Again, another silent tax that gets passed on to the homeowner. You know, if we're really wondering why prices keep getting higher, it's because there hasn't been transparency on what's been going into the product in terms of taxes. And our clients are paying after-tax dollars for this product. So innovation from an industry, you'll hear later about me talking about open source. We need to share ideas. We don't have time in terms of the environment to wait for 5 to 7 year cycles. We should be as open source as possible. But I think transparency is the foundation to true innovation.
Julie, I love your comment on inclusionary zoning, the silent tax. Obviously, the cost of 20% affordable has to get passed on to the affordable unless there's some relief from the tax burden that has already been in place on all units. That's just fabulous logic. What a great, great point. The silent tax. I look back and remember the period of time when we when the zoning was removed from the two kings, either side of Parliament and over at Spadina and along King Street, and because of areas that were not seeing development. And once that zoning was removed, height limitations removed, the industry as an agent of change remarkably responded and adapted. The same is true in your point here of a tax, this silent tax from inclusionary zoning. That is just absolutely brilliant. Miriam, you're also in this area of inclusionary zoning. I take it we haven't had to actually include it yet somewhere. We're just still working through the process. How have you responded to this on the inclusionary side?
So I think Julie she was on point with what she was saying. However, I just want to pause for a second and provide some facts as to where we stand. So we know that Ontario is in a housing supply crisis, but we're also in an affordability crisis. There are more than 81,000 households to be on the waiting list to be subsidized in Ontario. That waiting list, stated on the City of Toronto website, is 7 years for a bachelor unit, 12 years for a one-bedroom unit, and 10 years for larger units. In the last 5 years, only 2% of housing built or approved in Toronto has been affordable. The reason for this is the massive backlog of repairs that portfolios such as the Toronto Community Housing has, which has now ballooned to $3.1 billion. So yes, there has been some work done in partnerships between municipalities and developers where dollars have been taken for exchange but all of this money has gone to the revitalized portion of addressing affordable housing. So putting revitalize aside temporarily, we must add new affordable homes. It's a huge backlog. And as per some of the dialogue that we've already had to date, a parallel backlog that we have as developers is the NIMBYism, the red tape, the delays. Absolutely, we live in 5 to 10 year life cycles. It takes an immense amount of time to get a project through approvals. So we have a reciprocal issue between developers and municipalities, and we need to work together transparently, collaboratively to address this problem. It's our role as leaders in the industry and as government to solve this issue together. And it is possible, but we have to work together. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Thank you both. That was very insightful. Let me move on to Dina Pantalone, Managing Partner of National Homes. Dina manages the sales and marketing for National Homes and also Venturon Limited Partnership, which invests in startup companies providing new products, services, and technologies to the real estate industry. So very, very interesting portfolio there, Dina. National, of course, has a great reputation for innovation and particularly in the low-rise side. How are you addressing that innovative side on product design? And is there anything you'd like to share with us in that area from the National Homes perspective?
So,
Dina.
National has been in a fortunate position to build and develop master plan communities for over 30 years. I can tell you that we've always been innovators, but the industry is changing, and we've been doing things the same for a long time. National currently has around 4,000 units in development and construction over the next few years, and we'll be delivering product all across the GTA from Curtis, Mississauga, Burlington, Brampton, and mid-rise, low-rise, and high-rise. Our company focus is a lot on research and working from the inside out. So really understanding the consumer and their needs. And with this research, whether it's a small focus group or a think tank with the head of global design thinking from IBM, we design and deliver product that the consumer wants. We use this insight, excuse me, to make decisions on what features we incorporate into our developments in homes. We see things like ESG and sustainability, carbon footprint, wellness, healthcare, real growing concerns for our homeowners. Consumers are more sophisticated and demanding more responsible built forms. So we have to bring more innovative ideas to the table. And when we do that, we're getting results and positive interest. We now offer advanced energy efficient modular building systems called Panergy in multiple locations. The response to this product has been excellent. We're slowly implementing building systems and innovations and built form solutions such as ThoughtWire. So ThoughtWire is, think of it as a neural network, a roadmap on how a building thinks, how a community works.
Dina, I love your wellness and healthcare side, the kind of evolution to the support of wellness within the community is really, really, everywhere I go in the US, I see it in almost every project. And this kind of integration, not only with healthcare, but with your own self awareness of wellness is really powerful. Tell us a bit about Venturon and some of the things you've seen in the change in prop tech and the technological advances that you've been part of over the last, many years, but more recently.
Yes, so I started Venturon 5 years ago. It's a prop tech investment company, and I've traveled the world to research and find innovating companies to invest in and bring back to the development community that are finding solutions to real estate and the construction industry. Some really interesting products that I've seen that can help. But just getting back to some of the points that Brad and Peter were speaking to in your earlier questions around redevelopment and the processes and the digitization of development process. So urban planning, two founders from Toronto created a product called Proof Of, and they're piloting now in Miami and in Winnipeg. So we're seeing some of that type of digitization that will really help accelerate the process. And as we all know, that's at a federal government level. Municipal levels, they're starting to do that. And we know that innovation is key to providing a quicker process for us as developers and the municipal side, but as well as for the consumer. But another technology that I was introduced to in Europe is a very interesting product, Andy. It reduces the development time in doing things in a matter of minutes rather than a matter of months. This technology is called Spacemaker AI. They can help assess lands and deliver information such as shadow studies, service of allocation, noise studies, 3D density assessments, sightline studies. So, whether it's a developer funding some of these technologies, as Miriam mentioned, that we need to work together to help unlock the information about land in order to deliver faster. Now, let me put on my builder hat, and where I love to bridge the two worlds is addressing wellness and health and those demands. And we're, this past year has shown us that we use our homes for absolutely everything, and incorporating smart home technologies, workspace, smart filtration, other healthy home products we're bringing to market, because really it's about like what's at the forefront of the consumer's mind and delivering them products that they're asking for. I think that, Andy, I think you might want me to get into a little later on the 5 top prop tech trends as it relates to technology.
If we have time, let's come back to that one. Dina, thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to move over to Mike for a second. Thank you, Dina. That was awesome. Yes, we'll come back to prop tech perhaps in the Q&A period. Because I know there's a lot to be talked about there. But let me get back to Mr. Gentle Density for a minute. The process is sometimes more important than the outcome, Mike. And are municipalities helping or hurting you in your gentle density approach? What's your experience been, and how do you see us unlocking what seems to be just a logjam within the municipal system?
I think some municipalities definitely have it better than the others. I mean, some have a lot of experience. We look at the city of Toronto, for example. Some wards have more experience than the others. If you get outside of the downtown core, where they're used to more high-rise, some of the outside in the 406, but outside, if you look at Etobicoke or North York or Scarborough, they understand the nuances a lot more. I think the counselors are a lot more receptive than in some other areas. And just overall, I think in terms of the product type, that's where kind of our thesis of the gentle density, it's kind of the stacked townhome, back-to-back townhome and row townhomes kind of fits into established residential neighborhoods. but also becomes when you deal with these mature neighborhoods, you also deal with, like everyone else has mentioned 1,000 times, you deal with the NIMBYs, the ratepayers, the neighbors, sometimes tenants. Like it gets over and over in terms of they have a lot more experience. I see it in the news. They're a little more sophisticated in understanding the what goes on a day-to-day basis on it. So that brings more difficulty. And then at the same time, and then it brings you right back to the political spectrum of when you deal with the councilors and the city, they have their role to play as kind of, you know, you're kind of stuck in the middle and you have to figure the best way to kind of get through it.
There's it doesn't matter whether it's 3 stories or 33 stories.
You go through the same hassle, pretty much. That's our experience. So whether you're going for a high rise or mid rise or 6 townhomes, it's the process. It might be a little short on the timeline, but the process is still, you know, a big headache.
Well, I think there's a way that I know Peter had referenced this earlier, that you've got to, we have to expect it. We have to find ways to unlock it. Let me move to a broader question. Thank you, Mike. Let me move to a broader question. I'll start back with Brad and Peter on this. You know, but a lot of talk about the bubble, about the asset bubble, about this rapid price escalation in the marketplace. We're up some markets 20%, others high as 30% since last fall. It's just absolutely remarkable. I don't recall seeing it quite the escalation like this in I know it's been there. I've been through it many times, but this one's been very rapid in a strange environment where we're all online. Let me start with you, Brad. Are we about to? Are we lemmings heading over the correction cliff, or are we self-regulating to the extent? Is the consumer about to throw up his hands with this price escalation, or is a correction inevitable? What can we expect from the Bank of Canada? Mr. Macklem's made noises about tightening up on mortgage approvals again. What's your sense about where we're going, or really, frankly, probably the next 60 days, maybe a little longer, but where do you see this going?
Well, I'm assuming, like everybody else on the call, my crystal ball is a little foggy these days. The reality is that the signals are out there that we're seeing prices rise too quickly. Things are happening at a very rapid pace. I think a really positive outcome for all of us as home builders and developers who are looking to meet the supply needs of the industry would be to plateau at these very robust levels. And yet, as individual builders, sometimes we tend to look at what did whatever builder get last week. And, you know, I recall a call from yourself, Andy, where, to be honest, you gave me a little bit of a hard time that we may be open too low. And I think we have to be very attuned to, are our prices sustainable versus just achievable in the moment? I think that we can all agree that with bond rates trending back up fairly dramatically over the last 8 weeks, mortgage rates are likely to follow. And I think our pricing today is absolutely a function of how much per month, not how much. And with the entire amount of these historically low interest rates priced into the equation today, I think the resilience of the buyer to deal with some what could be fairly significant increases on a percentage basis. So while you might think historically a half-point increase is not a lot, when your starting point is 1.5 points, a half point up is a very significant increase in rates. And so I think we want to be measured. We want to be thoughtful. I think the other thing we want to do, which certainly we're doing at Mattamy, is we want to guide as much of our product towards real end users as opposed to investors and speculators. And to do that, we are taking a very aggressive approach on our deposit structures, and we're asking for very significant downstrokes to hopefully insulate ourselves against you know, a downturn that might have a few people running for the hills.
It's all about the closing, isn't it? It's all about delivering the product. Peter, what's your comment? Are we more of the same? Are we, or do we think we're about to experience a pushback as a correction on the horizon? What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I have all the answers, and I guarantee everything I'm about to say is going to be 100% true for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be bang on right. So there's my disclaimer. I always look back at points of reference. Everyone chooses a points of reference as either recent or convenient or where their mind goes. Like, I still try to look at things over 5 and 10 year periods. If you look at what pricing was 5 years ago and where it is today, and the journey it took between 17, like in the GTA, there is a real demand for housing. Fact. In the GTA, there's a supply of housing that cannot meet the real demand. Over longer periods of time, there's consumer sentiment, there's policies, there's mortgage rates that will ebb and flow this market. And we're trying to look at things not on a week or 6 month basis, notwithstanding, of course, prices can't continue going up at the pace they've been going up, nor is it healthy, nor do we as a development community want to do that. But a couple things, when you look at it over a 5 year period, I've seen ebbs and flows in sales. And if you say, how many houses were sold in 18 and 19 and how many are sold in 20 and 21, and then average it out, it's probably not that much different than where our trend should be. It doesn't mean that prices should continue going up or that I'm comfortable with them going up, but I'm seeing trade issues, supply chain things. I can't get appliances. We can have the lumber discussion. I mean, it's like watching Bitcoin, right? So there's all these things that are pushing and pulling prices and demands that, you know, someone said earlier that the developers are in control. Maybe. I see it like a dance. I won't even say that we're in control. Like, we're dancing in a circle of 30 people, and every one of these people are pushing and pulling us in different directions. So do I think that if looking at it over a longer period of time, is the increase less dramatic or the volumes less dramatic? Yes. Does that mean they can continue going at this pace? Of course not. But there's many things pushing and pulling these things that are affecting us. It's not just what I want to sell a house for. And I'll leave you with one comment, because Brad alluded to this, you alluded to this. We do not make money when we sell a house. We make money when we close a house. Nothing I can tell you. I don't care who you are, that's a factual reality. So we are focusing on deposits. There is a combination of, we're looking to manage our potential cost increases rather than look at all the shiny margin I can make. Like, we're not sitting, I mean, I don't know about other organizations, but with all of our partners, we're not sitting here saying, how do I get every dollar? It's everything's moving so quickly, and it's more about how do we maintain rather than how do we gouge everybody for every dollar we can get, because we need people to close, and we focus on deposits rather than price increases today.
Very good points. Thank you, Peter. That was exceptional. Julie, more industry collaboration, co-creation, crowd sharing on projects, placemaking. What's your opinion about where we are and where we're going, Julie?
Well, I'd like to see a much more open source collaborative environment. As everyone has said, it's 3 to 7 years, 3 to 10 years in terms of the delivery of projects. The environment can't wait. I look at the solar panels I have on my house, it's 14 years. I haven't seen any adopters in my neighborhood. So something's wrong, we're stuck. So the reason that we're stuck is because we don't share. And also, it's not because we don't want to share, it's because we're in silos all the time. Once you have a site, it's site specific, and everyone's had a different relationship with financing. One of the most proud examples of collaboration that Canada has done on a world scale is the project Brock Commons in British Columbia. You can ask the architect anything you want. You can get a set of those drawings. You don't have to spend the 5 years that they spent developing one of the tallest cross-laminated timber buildings in the world. You can actually pop in instantly and be transformed by their knowledge and their experience. So if we want to meet the goals for the environment, especially now meeting these new tier and green standards that are in Toronto and should be elsewhere, we need to share our experiences with components, materials, assemblies, and we need to do it pretty quickly.
Thank you, Julie. Very, very good points. Dina, tell us a bit about prop tech and how that might apply against where we're going in this market. Does it help us manage our affairs better and potentially create greater affordability, or in Julie's case, greater sharing of information? Dina.
So this is one of the reasons why I started Ventron in investing in prop tech 5 years ago. I understood that the playing fields rearrange and the way the game's being played is different. By building the global network, I'm able to have a snapshot of the different technologies and products that are available to homeowners of today. And some of these technologies, as I mentioned earlier, such as a Panergy wall solution with an energy savings cladding that's been in Europe for 30 years that saves approximately 15% on your energy bills, as that relates to affordability as we move into the future, based on what Julie's mentioning around, solar energy savings product that we're seeing with Panergy that's coming from Europe has been around for many, many years. When are we ripe and ready here in Canada to start adopting some of these trends and components, and a lot of the IoT and smart products, whether it's just not only connectivity, everyone knows, the smart home, but also in construction, the construction technologies, with all the delays and expenses skyrocketing, tech that can build faster, lower our costs as a developer to meet the demand, speed up the process. And any things that, like a digital collaboration tool on one end, whether it's a modular autonomous construction tool like AI platforms, or AI on the other end, around robotics. This helps us with a variety of different issues, whether it's supply, unskilled labor, to have more affordable product. Smart buildings, and that's a huge trend, and what that allows for cost savings, in addition to improving health and well-being and safety for the homeowner. Any tech in this area of new building materials, as I mentioned, carbon reduction, energy monitoring, we'll see greater levels of adoption this year. Obviously, ESG has been a very important prior to COVID. COVID's only accelerated this going forward, because it's really the future of work and mobility. The changing.
Dina, thank you. I'm kind of with all tech, I get a little overwhelmed, but I think we've got a whole program on this with you coming up.
Anytime.
Prop tech would be a fascinating discussion for a summit series in the future. Miriam, or let me ask Mike first. What's your biggest challenge in the midst of this going forward? How are you planning your world of your business in the next several months going forward? Are you planning adjusting to markets that may correct, or markets that will continue to swoon? What do you think, Mike?
Since we like to focus on type of family housing in mature neighborhoods, I think we'd do quite well. I'd be a little afraid if we were going to start construction a couple months ago, or in the last 6 months, or right now. So we're pretty lucky. We feel we're going to launch something soon with you guys, and we have a few other projects in the pipeline right now. So we feel very confident with our product type, as long as we can keep our land prices in check, which is a whole other, discussion in general. We feel very comfortable moving forward.
Your hard cost management is really part of the most difficult challenge right now, from lumber to concrete. Peter mentioned it in his discussion, how to maintain, or at least measure when it's performing like Bitcoin. How are you controlling your costs, Mike?
The great thing, one is in terms of timing, depending on where you launch, when you get your zoning, when you're going to start construction, you're always going to have some sort of surprise. But the tighter you have that schedule, the tighter you can understand where your costs are. So we try to streamline everything as much as possible. But again, it's a challenge for everybody. The lumber is bad right now. No one talks about mechanical. Mechanical is probably just as bad as lumber right now. And that goes into what type of units you deal with, what kind of mechanical system you have, and type of units. You design your units differently to deal with the added expenses of that. One project we'll be launching soon, our development charges went up 10% above what the posted rate was going to be on that date. So we have to adjust for that right away. So all these little things is I think the best. If you're on the smaller scale, kind of where we do in that kind of gentle missing middle townhome project, I think it's probably you have a little more flexibility when trying to streamline your timing. Again, wood frame construction, when you deal with concrete, forming contractors is a whole other mess right now in the industry too. You got to get in line with everyone else. And if you're a smaller project, you're just going to have to pay that premium.
It's a battle out there. Thank you, Mike. Let me take it home with Miriam. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and we'll wrap up, and I'll turn it over to Chris for Q&A. We'll run through to about 12:15 from questions from the audience. We've had a huge crowd here today, so I know there are multiple questions. Miriam, take us home with a thought about where's Mansouri going over this next year? When we come back a year from now, I'm going to hold you to it. But what's your what's your projection of where we're going, and how are you dealing with it at Mansouri?
So Mansouri Living is launching a fairly large, for our company, large mixed-use development right now at Richmond Hill. It's at an iconic corner at the northeast corner of Bayview and Elgin Mills. And what's interesting about this project is it has a nice scale and variety of product type. So we are starting with a very hot product type right now, which is the townhome, luxury townhome product. I think we're in a good cycle of the development process where our projections and numbers and our performance are fairly accurate for the low-rise marketplace, similarly to what Mike said. And then towards Q1, Q2 of 2022, we're going to be launching a mid-rise product type, which is 2 14-story towers, close-ish to the ground, which I find that the end user will be a little bit more comfortable as we transition from the threat and anxieties that have come from COVID, leading towards the comfort again of going vertical.
I'm excited about to watch to see what you come with, particularly with your playgrounds. Those are going to be the greatest in the marketplace. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all your attention. Thank you, speakers. Wow, my head is spinning with the new knowledge and new experiences I've just been able to glean from this. That's what this is all about, the learning and sharing that Julie so beautifully outlined. So I want to thank each and every one of you, Peter and Brad and Michael and Miriam and Dina. It's absolutely, and Julie, of course, absolutely outstanding presentation. Let me turn it over to Chris Markovic, my CEO, who will go into a Q&A session for all of you for the next 15 minutes. And we will also, don't forget, we're doing a draw for the lunch sponsor from CIBC. So over to you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks everyone on the panel. It's a great discussion this morning. We've got some really good questions coming in. So I think for what we'll do is sort of rapid fire. I'll direct it to one of the panelists. And then maybe if there's an add-on, I'll allow one, and then we'll go to the next one. The first question is for Julie, and it's specifically to Julie. It's from an anonymous attendee out in the audience. To Julie, the point on transparency. Please provide what that might look like. What does the industry not, why does the industry not provide itemized pricing at the sales point, like break out the components, say 4 to 6 categories? Would that help or hinder the industry?
I think that's a brilliant question. Let me talk about the parts that are very transparent, and I would question if any other industry is as transparent. When you buy a condominium, because of a fantastic infrastructure set up by Terrion, you get to understand what all your additional costs are. You also get to see an operating budget, and the developer is responsible for that budget when they deliver the product. The components that we would know certainly can be disclosed. We can show a detailed list of the taxes that go into your purchase price. As I said, an Altus report shows 20% of a $1 million purchase in the GTA is taxes. That is transparent, it's public information. Components that belong to other parties obviously would not be open, but what we're prepared to do, and I'm hoping our industry is doing this and will do this, is all our green initiatives. We're trying to get LEED certification for gold level. We will be, once the project is finished, sharing as much as we can on the components that were used, what worked, what did not work. And we think that is an amazing contribution back to the industry, which we all will collectively share and post and do together. Transparency in terms of profitability, it doesn't take very much for someone to search what a piece of land sold for. It doesn't take very much to see what the purchase price is. I think what people are shocked about is to see what percentage of the ticker price goes to taxes, which is 20% right now on $1 million price.
Excellent. There's a bit of a follow-up question to that. And Brad, I'm going to ask you this one. Why don't builders break out taxes on homes and show that separately, like the gas tax, like when you go to the pump?
It's a great question, Chris, and certainly one that the industry has debated a number of times, and even ourselves at Mattamy Homes have debated it. I think one of the biggest challenges we face is we're competing every day against the resale market. And an unsophisticated consumer, or even a sophisticated consumer, seeing a builder's price net of tax and then having the taxes added on and comparing that to a resale home where obviously all the taxes have been paid and there is no tax applicable, creates potentially a competitive disadvantage. So while it helps us tell our story about why prices are going up, the comparative analysis between resale and new becomes a challenging one.
Got it. Thank you. Martin K in the audience asked the question. I'm going to point this one to Miriam, you. Can you speak to this? Everyone has left the city. Whoever sold and moved out of the city sold their home to someone else who will remain in the city. So did everyone really leave?
So thank you for the question, Martin. I don't think that everyone has left. Again, it is an issue of preference. It's where do you want to be? Where do you want to live? You can see that clearly when you study and analyze days on the market of the real estate that's in the city still. So it's less than 30 days on average right now. That tells us the people aren't leaving the city, and not just days on market, but these assets are selling with 22, 30 offers. And again, I think it's a preference issue with different kind of people and families. Do they want to be in proximity to potential future jobs in the city, in exciting, dynamic cultural places, or do they prefer to have that destination as home place? And I still think that there's going to be a dynamic that moves between these two realms.
Thanks, Mary. That's good. Peter, Jeffrey Steiner in the audience. Do you expect increased investment from foreign pension funds and sovereign wealth funds into the Canadian residential development sector? How important is their source of capital now and going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a liquidity issue in terms of investment going into the real estate market. So I don't think we have a market that is so undercapitalized that they have to look for will people potentially invest globally? I think the answer is maybe. And the reason I say maybe is whether we like to believe this or not, development, like we have about $4 billion of development going on in the US. The margins in development in other places around the world are sometimes double what they are here in Toronto. So it's not saying that there isn't more security or safety potentially developing here than other places, but you have to accept a lower rate of return. If there was a drought of capital that wanted to go into this business either by way of debt or equity, and the industry was forcing to pull people in quicker and go out and look for outsourcing maybe, but I don't think that's a lack of liquidity is really an issue in the market today, and a lack of investment. Will people come in? Sure. Will people be able to understand and underwrite development in Toronto? We develop in multiple states and multiple provinces and only 2 countries, but it's a lot simpler in other places. So wrapping people's heads around it's why there's not developers that come very often from abroad that just come in and develop what they do in Miami or New York or in other places. Like development here is very complicated. So I don't think that it's going to drive more or less growth, whether that capital comes or not. I think it will come, not in huge droves, but it'll slowly come. But they're going to have to accept a lower return to come here than most other places investing in development.
Thanks. It's interesting. A follow-up to that comes from another member in the audience, and I'm gonna keep this with you, Peter. Is now the best time to buy a lot of real estate properties as investments?
It's funny. I probably get some form of that question on the regular, and my answer is always the same. If you're buying and selling in the same market, typically that takes care of itself, generally speaking. But if you're buying to invest for 6 months or 12 months, then there's probably no good time to buy, and you shouldn't be buying if that's your investment cycle. If you're talking about over 5 and 10 and 20 year periods, everybody who was crazy at what they paid for a piece of land 20 years ago is the neighborhood genius today, right? Like that's real. So I think that it's all about, again, perspective and reference point. If you're trying to time the market, it's like speaking to your broker and saying, the market went up 10%. Should I wait for a pullback? Like over a 10, 20, 30 year investment cycle. Like it's almost doesn't matter if you come in at a peak or at a low at some point. And if you want to time the market perfectly, well, me too, and everyone else, and it's easy, and it's just not realistic.
Long-term hold, stay the course. I'm gonna ask the next question, short one, to Brad and to Mike. We'll start with Mike. How are you managing material cost increases and indeed material shortages? Brad, Mike?
Brad, if you want to go first.
Sure, I'll take that first. It's a challenge, to say the least. We are fortunate in our industry here in Toronto that we are we are selling our product somewhat in advance. So in some ways, that is a challenge. In other ways, that means we can also forward buy and try and time those quantities with what we require. At Mattamy, our volumes are also so significant that we are getting into stockpiling and warehousing product well in advance of when we require them, so that we can hopefully control the supply chain as much as the cost. I think that right now, we all have to recognize that we are winning on the top line, and we're going to have to give some back in the cost structure. And that's not just a Toronto issue or a Canada issue. That's a worldwide supply chain issue, and products are costing more, and we need to be prepared to absorb that a little bit going forward.
Thanks, Brad. Mike?
I agree with Brad's sentiment. Obviously, he's talking from a different perspective, but even on the smaller side, I think it's you who mentioned to us earlier how, just getting the odd appliance when there's a shortage too, they would just have it shipped to the site and just figure out some storage for on site just to make sure they had it in time. But yeah, the few big trades right now, there's with lumber, mechanical, with, and then with the trades in terms of the labor shortage right now as well. Again, I think it all comes down to timing. When you sell, you hopefully you sold at the best time, you're able to keep your costs in line for what you sold at that time. And if you sold a year and a half earlier, you don't know where you're going to end up. Where, if you're within kind of 12 months between selling and, or preferably within 6 months between selling and starting construction, that's probably a lot more ideal in terms of trying to fix your costs.
Excellent, thank you. We're getting close to wrapping up the hour. I have one final question, and Dina, I'm going to ask this one of you. That came in from the audience. If you, as a COVID-19 aware business leader, could go back in time and speak to the more naive version of yourself on New Year's Day 2020, what advice would you give yourself?
So as I said, National has always been about, and myself driving that force, about how we live in our built world environment is very important to the design. And whether it's, a bright idea, a healthy home, I think that I would continue on the same path around doing my job well, thinking ahead to stay ahead. And that's always been our philosophy. It's in my DNA, it's in my family's DNA, and that's what our business is about.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to, again, Andy at the beginning mentioned all of our sponsors, but one last time, I'd like to thank our title sponsors, CIBC, SR Law, Balcony Bliss, My Design Studio, Sagan, Smart Touch, Next Home, Buzz Home, Build, Aurea, Reliance, and Westmount Project. A special thank you to our event producer, the team at McHewitt, and our draw, courtesy of CIBC. So after this call, 2 members of the audience will receive an email from CIBC with the winners, with your lunch gift certificate rather. And our first winner is Justin Bozio from Minto. And our second winner is Gurpreet Singh from My Investment Brokers. Congratulations. Again, thank you for joining us today, everyone in the audience. Please keep an eye out for the email invitations that come out Our next 3 series are going to be some very exciting and big ones, starting with diversity and inclusion in our industry in April. In May, we will be having a session with a focus on and a feature of Metrolinx and transit-oriented development. And then in June, the State of the Union with Benny Tal. Following that, we will be running these all through until December. So we look forward to having you back. Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon.